Then we're the next week, I forgot. I'm sorry.
Oh, I know.
I'm sorry.
I think I have a catheter in my car. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. First thing we're gonna do is do the pledge of allegiance. We got it over here. That's so you're on.
All right, I've got this one down now. Almost there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll get there someday.
Okay, can we do a roll call, please?
Vesta Sticks. Here. Mike Nichols.
Here.
Vicky Clues.
Here.
Lisa Nominson.
Here.
Kathy Dahl. Here. Joe Roga.
Here.
Pitt Marquez de la Plata.
Here. Better.
That's everyone that's here.
Lisa, can I give you the floor for a sec?
Me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yeah.
This is my second time appearing remotely as a caregiver for a spouse. There's no other individual in the room, and my audio and visual will remain on even during presentations.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
We're gonna move to approval of agenda. I hope everyone's had a chance to look at it. I do want to make one adjustment to the agenda, which is that we have another person that's remote, which is Cynthia Stryker. And because we just found out about this, we have to actually add it to the agenda. It's one of those legal things. And then the board, I mean, the MAC will need to vote to state that that's okay. So I'd like to add Cynthia to the agenda to attend remotely. And Cynthia, if you're there.
Oh, you know what? She is there. She's in as an attendee. So we need to promote her to a panelist. That's what the problem is. Let's see.
I've made it so that Cynthia can talk, and once you vote, I'll promote her to a panelist.
Thank you, Leo.
Okay.
We still have Leo.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
First we have to.
Oh, yeah,
get the agenda.
So first, can anyone, can we vote on the agenda with that addition? Motion.
Move.
Oh,
Is there a motion to approve
Okay,
the
yeah.
agenda?
yes, let's vote on that.
All right, second, anyone? Second. All right, can we get a roll call on that?
Vesta Sticks.
Yes.
Mike Nichols.
Yes.
Vicky Clues.
Yes.
Lisa Nominson.
Yes.
Kathy Dahl.
Yes.
Joe Roga.
Yes.
Chair Pitt.
Yes.
Motion passes. Let's have background noise on. Maybe it's a mute that needs to happen. I hear background noise.
All right, Cynthia,
Okay, I'm here.
So do you,
can you just tell everyone why you're remote?
Certainly. And so I thank you. I wanted to request that the MAC allow me to participate remotely due to emergency circumstances. And those are that I was in a very serious car wreck in mid-July. And since that time, I have continuously been in various hospitals and rehabilitation facilities. So that's where I still am. And I'm doing much, much better. But at this point, I can neither walk nor drive a car.
but you're looking good.
So I do have 2 roommates with me in this facility. They are both elderly women.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. Can we make a note also that Betsy Van Dyke just came in?
Sorry, we're behind you for 30 miles.
And so is there a motion?
Uh,
We need a motion to.
Yeah.
Approve Cynthia.
I saw it. Oh,
Second,
Okay.
can we get a roll call on that?
Vesta? Yes. Betsy? Yes. Mike?
yes.
Vicky? Yeah. Lisa?
Yes,
Kathy? Yes. Joe?
Yes.
And Pip?
Yep. Okay, now it's time for anyone on the council, if you have a conflict of interest with anything that is on the agenda, to bring it up now. Anybody? Okay. I'm excited about this one. We're gonna do an oath of office for a newly appointed Rio Nido alternate. I am so excited that Jerry is here. I actually have an alternate. It's been a very, very long time. So I'm very happy about that. So I think Lynda, are you doing the?
I am in the irons. We're just gonna order. Yeah, we can send it over here, and we are going to repeat after me, and the only thing you're gonna say differently is, I'll say, I state your name, don't say state your name. Okay, so you go ahead and raise your right hand. I state your name. I, Jennifer Otten. Do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear. That I will support and defend. So support and defend. The Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the State of California. And the Constitution of the State of California. Against all enemies. Against all enemies. Foreign and domestic. Foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance. That I will bear true faith and allegiance. To the Constitution of the United States. To the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the State of California. And the Constitution of the State of California. That I take this obligation freely. Take this obligation freely. Without any mental reservation. Without any mental reservation. Or purpose of evasion. No purpose of evasion. And that I will well. And I will well. And faithfully. And faithfully. Discharge the duties. Discharge the duties. Upon which I am about to enter. Upon which I'm about to enter. Yeah. I was the one that made that spell.
I have a question. Did she get to come up here now?
No.
That's if both of you can sign that.
Yes, all right.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the consent agenda, which is basically the minutes from June 8th. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes, or can I get a motion to approve as it?
I moved the consent agenda.
He
I'll
moved-
second it.
Second?
Yeah. If Mike approved it, we're good. Vesta? Yes. Betsy? Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Vicky? Yes. Lisa?
yes,
Kathy? Yeah. Joe?
Yes.
Pip?
Yes.
And Cynthia?
Yeah, well,
You
yes,
can.
I would if I were here last time.
Okay. All right, county report.
Hey. Okay, there are so many great opportunities right now for engagement and things in the county, and we just wanted to make sure you're aware of it. The MAC representatives have some spaces open. We also have a governance committee meeting coming up on Saturday, and we also have, it's also the election season for your community service district. So let me tell you a few of the openings, so that if you're interested, you'll be able to participate. So we have in the Debbie, could you tell us what the openings are gonna be in the here it is.
Oh,
Sorry.
and maybe for the owl, if you can come up to the, sorry.
The podium are-
I missed it.
So we're going to have coming up in for the selection process in the fall, Forestville, Hacienda, and Guerneville areas of LRRMAC will have openings for 2-year terms from January 2024 to December 2025. If you have any questions about where you are on the map, that map is available online on the County of Lynda Hopkins Lower Russian River map pages. If you just put in your address and it will tell you what area you are in. Applications are due by August 31st, and the link to that is also on our website pages. So that's if you're interested in the Municipal Advisory Council. In local community service districts, we have, I'm just gonna kind of go down this to only get the Lower Russian River MAC ones. We have, just in case there's someone here from Occidental, we have Occidental Community Service Districts, 2 different spaces. Russian River County Water is looking for a board member. Timber Cove County Water, Monterey Recreation and Park, and Russian River Recreation and Park. So there are elections that open July 17th for applicants, close August 11th, and then the voting is in September. So there's some great opportunities there. This Saturday, we have a governance meeting at the Guerneville School to talk about different governance options. We've been doing a series, if you haven't heard yet, we'll be doing a series, government study on options and to improve local service delivery in this area. And we will have a really great meeting from 10:30 to 12:30 at the Guerneville School this Saturday. And at this meeting, the first meeting, we got input from the community. The second meeting, we're going to be talking about different governance structures like community service districts or incorporating a town or changing how we do things within the county. So there's various options so that people can learn what options we have in front of us. So there's some of the great engagement things we have in forward so that we can all work together to make West County the most awesome place ever.
And then I will provide some updates on kind of big picture county funding opportunities. So just last month in June, we got through our budget hearing process. And one of the exciting outcomes is that I was able to secure $4 million for community infrastructure investments into the 5th district, so into West County. And we still have about $1 million left from the $2 million that I was able to secure last year, because we've kind of been holding some aside because we've heard of some exciting potential projects. And so that means that we basically have $5 million to invest in some key areas in West County. So we'd love to hear from the MAC about what your priorities might be. There are some conversations germinating around, possibly improving the area that's owned by the county behind the Park and Ride in downtown Guerneville to create a dog park and or use soccer fields. There's also a similar desire for, some downtown park improvements in Occidental. So there's some different ideas that we're hearing floating out in the community, and would love to receive your input on that process. In addition, I do want to acknowledge that unfortunately this meeting is in conflict with another important meeting that involves West County that is currently going on at the Planning Commission, which is the housing element, which has been very controversial, especially in Forestville and Guerneville. And so we've been getting some text message updates from our staff who are listening in there, and it will ultimately come before the Board of Supervisors. So that is not the final decision. But kind of once we see what the Planning Commission application does, then again, I would love to have a conversation, with the MAC or with the community about kind of what the next steps are and what we still see in terms of gaps. I do want to recognize that this is the river MAC and not the coastal MAC, but we have a very big meeting, for those of you who enjoy the coast, coming up next Monday, when the local coastal plan will come before the Board of Supervisors. There are a number of outstanding issues of controversy, including public access to the Estero Americano, including parcel-specific zoning, and including vacation rentals. Which is no surprise to all of you who have been involved in vacation rental conversation inland. It's just as controversial out in the coast as it was in the lower Russian River. So those are some of the issues that the board will be deliberating on. And additionally, I wanted to make everyone aware of a very exciting funding opportunity that is technically a coastal resilience funding opportunity, but this is NOAA, so they don't define the coast just the way that California does, which is like just the sliver of the coast that goes up to the nearest ridgeline, which in our north coast is not very deep at all, right? In some areas, where there are sort of flatter areas, you can go miles inland. But NOAA has one-time funding available from the Inflation Reduction Act for grants that range between $15 and $75 million. And they're looking for regional resilience initiatives. And because Guerneville is close enough to the coast, also to be impacted by climate change and things like sea level rise, which will exacerbate, our flooding challenges here, we would potentially be eligible for funding. So we are trying to pull together a coalition. Kashaya is very interested in participating in this grant. I plan to reach out to Greater Manchuria as well. The Avid Open Space District, regional parks, Sonoma Water, and then our office are all very interested. And so Elise is really being kind of the point person to try to pull together all of these different parties and all the different ideas and come up with a wish list before mid-August when the letter of intent is due. So it's a 5-page letter of intent due in August, followed by if you are invited to continue the application, then the full application is due in January. But they're actually looking for their bundle, give us the everything big picture. Like we want to see lots of different projects under one umbrella for a regional approach. So we're also in conversation with the Sonoma Mendocino Economic Development District as another possible partner or applicant. So if there's any questions on any of that, let me know. Oh, and one other thing I want to mention, because we're right next door. The Guerneville Vets Building Sheriff Substation has been falling on top of the deputies, literally held together with sort of plastic and tarp over the ceiling, which is hiding asbestos. We did finally get that repaired. We are in dire need of rebuilding that building. So I did have an excellent meeting with Cindy Foreman from Sonoma County Fire District, Sheriff Eddie Engram, Jeff Duvall, who's our head of the Department of Emergency Management, myself, and Johanna Silberts, who is the head of Sonoma County Public Infrastructure, so COPI. And we are trying to come up with a plan to rebuild the Vets building sooner rather than later, and to actually sort of have it include both the fire station and the sheriff substation, as well as community meeting space. I did learn by listening to the grant talk for that NOAA resilience grant that new infrastructure is not an eligible expense. However, rehabilitation of existing infrastructure is. So if it's possible to basically tear that down, leave one post and it is a retrofit, that may be a potential source of funding. But another source of funding is that if the new fire sales tax measure passes, which will be on the ballot in March, not because we're at a government meeting to tell you what to do, but I can inform you that it is on the ballot. And then if it passes, it would result in $15 million for the Guerneville Fire Station, which would go towards this sort of shared building. It would also have an opportunity for community space. So it might be possible, again, knock on wood, for the salt of the shoulder, that if that comes to fruition and there's money from the NOAA grant, that we could have a really, really big down payment on a brand new piece of civic infrastructure that would be more fire resilient, more flood resilient, and also contain an emergency operations center to be able to sort of have an incident command locally in West County in the event of wildfire out here. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And I also, just before I take those questions, I just want to say, Cynthia, thank you so much for being here. And it is so wonderful to see you. And I feel like it shows your dedication to this job that I think you're the first person I've ever seen call in from basically a hospital bed. So thank you for being here, and you are amazing. And it's so good to see you looking so well also after such a big incident.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Is the Vets building part of the sheriff substation? Would that eligible for rehab?
It's the
too?
whole thing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the lot sort of is limited, but we also do own the right of way for the road, so the lot could actually extend into that right of way as well. And it's The Bank of America building is actually, I think, the highest, the Gurnville Vets building is sort of right below, so it would have to be raised up, sort of like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, or sorry, through the chair.
I have a question. What's the timing on decision-making on the infrastructure funds?
Rolling, there is no specific deadline, we sort of have a tentative team meeting, I think scheduled for next week, but we're not in a rush. And we actually have set aside some buckets of funds, so for instance, we're trying to set aside a bucket for EV infrastructure and for crosswalks and sort of bike and pedestrian improvements. So one thing that I would really love to hear from all of you is, are we in need of bus stations or crosswalks or things like that? Because we do have a fund set aside to try to make it safer, particularly around schools would be a great one, great opportunity, safe routes to schools, to make some of those improvements. And we are working on some culvert issues as well in Villa Grand and Rio Nido as part of that, funding, so.
Okay, would it, I think it might be great if we set up an ad hoc.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and it might actually be really helpful to set up an ad hoc and then also maybe invite in stakeholders, because I can have a group working in Occidental, so maybe pull one person from their group, it's on a formal map, bring in someone from the coast map, maybe go sort of south and north coast, so that we actually have kind of a West County wide look at what are some of our priorities.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think.
That would have to be a subcommittee then, have that talk, if we pull in people from outside the.
You can still meet with community members, as an ad hoc. It's just they wouldn't be ad hoc members, they would just be sort of community members attending,
One quick question on the regional resilience initiative. Could we include Monterey and Casadero fire stations, which are non-reinforced masonry in the
Possibly for reinforcement.
Right.
Yeah, so like if there's a way to like put rebar in or something like that to the existing structure, or if you have like a cost estimate, please get that to us, because actually, the other thing that I think NOAA is really looking for is like, they want alphabet soup of agencies. So the more names that we can have on there, great. So that's why we're like, I can open space, Sonoma Water, regional parks, Kashaya being interested, and also there is a priority around both tribal engagement as well as disadvantaged community engagement. So looking at where some of our more vulnerable community members are, that does include Monterey, Gurnville, and Christian Caz. So that I think is also compelling.
great.
So so basically what we're trying to do is build like a spreadsheet wish list that we will then turn into this letter of interest, intent, whatever, and then get that. So.
Thank you.
Oh, and I forgot, Bodega Marine Lab is also interested in reaching out in a conversation with them as well, and Sonoma Water through their partnership with the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes. Did I get it right? Yeah, CW3, too many new acronyms.
So places and times of the upcoming meetings, the governance is 10:30 at Gurnville School.
Correct.
The LCP is what time?
9 a.m. Monday at the Board of Supervisors or virtually.
Oh, okay, at the BOS. And then we are skipping the MAC meeting in August, mid-August, and joining with the Coast MAC at the end of the month.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so we're skipping our own and doing that one.
And the Coast MAC is skipping next week's too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then where is that one?
It is probably going to be at Gurnville Elementary.
Okay,
Yes. Say confirm the space.
okay, so that's LCP. Okay, and that's people's.
And anyone else have a,
Lisa has her hand up.
oh, hi, Lisa.
Hi, Supervisor, can you again go over the housing element, like where we are and what the next step is, just so that people who may not be here watch it on the recording again? Thank you.
Great. And that's also something because Leo's been listening into the planning commission, he might have something to add. But basically, in terms of big picture process, it's at the planning commission today. Maybe Leo knows whether they decided to have another meeting at the planning commission or whether they're gonna wrap it up today. But basically, it has to get through a vote at the planning commission and then come to a vote of the Board of Supervisors. And then it would be sort of sent on to the state for approval. So there still is an opportunity to modify it after the planning commission votes at the Board of Supervisors hearing. And Leo, do you want to chime in with what you've heard today?
That's right. So it sounds like they had already planned on having next week's planning commission meeting available for the housing element again, and they will definitely need that time. So that's Thursday, July 20th at 1 o'clock. And they did the current meeting today in the board chambers, and it was hybrid. So I would expect they would do that again next week. And the meeting did include a lot of comments from people today about concerns about specific sites, and the commissioners asked for additional information about many of the sites. And so for West County, I know that there were people who wanted sites in all the areas to have some additional work done by staff and the consultants. So that includes Forestville sites, the Guerneville site that is still there, and also the Grayton sites. So the staff will be busy producing some additional information, and then I would expect to see that material in the packet, which is promised at no later than 72 hours before the meeting. Additionally, I believe that they will allow comment again next week. It may be just if you did not comment today, because I think it's the same hearing. But there's also the possibility that if there's significant new information, that they would allow anybody to comment specifically on the new information, even if you were there today, because I know I see some of you who I know were there today. So that's where that is. And I mean, really, that the document's like quite overwhelming. I mean, most of the comments were about specific sites, but they spent, you know, hours talking about like larger policy issues and goals. So it's going to be a real big challenge to see how they handle it. But for those of you interested in specific parcels, I think that will take up the majority of the time next time. And there's concerns about sites in every district. So I'm not sure how they're going to find a solution, to be honest, because a lot of people turned out with concerns about Pengrove. People turned out about other sites that I was less familiar with. So it's going to be an interesting meeting next week to see how they come to resolution. Thanks.
And I just want to add that sort of Leo and I worked really hard behind the scenes with staff. And so the original proposal for West County was a complete train wreck. Like a derailment train wreck, and maybe the train is still very wobbly and it's not as good as it should be, but it's a lot better than it started out, where we were seeing, like, what was it, a 50% increase to population in Forestville with absolutely no improvements to the public infrastructure needed to support it. There were multiple sites that were proposed that were actually landlocked. Like, you couldn't actually get to a public road from them. So it's like, how is it buildable if it's bounded on all sides by, you know, different parcels that are owned by different people? You know, and out in Guerneville, there were multiple ones on Loveland Road, which only, as we all know, is a super narrow road that's kind of always falling into the creek, and we always worry about school buses, let alone having 1,000 more people, you know, living back in what is now Apple Orchard. So I sent some very strongly worded letters and did a ton of research, and so a lot of the worst parcels in West County did come off, but I think that there's still important conversations to be had, one of which is the Forestville skate spot parcel, which remains on at the maximum density zoning, even though I have asked for it to be split zoned, so that we would actually be able to move forward with the skate park that the community has been asking for literally 6 years. So, you know, it's frustrating when you have one, you know, level of government doing one thing, and like, meanwhile, we've been working with the community on something completely different. And they also have proposed a number of parcels that are in the floodplain. So, you know, parcels that we looked at for, hey, can we build a fire station there? And we were told by consultants, no, you can't build a fire station because it floods. And they're like, let's put 600 units of housing on it. Like, you know, just head scratchers, where again, different departments in the county not knowing what the other ones are doing. So it's been a process. And hopefully the planning commission can continue to wrangle out some of these details, and then we'll have another bite of the apple at the board meeting. So.
It was a good meeting that I had to leave for this one, but I'm very impressed with the listening abilities of the planning commission. They didn't just stonewall anybody, they listened to everything and asked questions. It was good.
Anyone in the public have any questions or comments for Supervisor Hopkins or anyone on District 5? Anybody? Okay.
Anybody on the?
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah, I know. On Zoom, online, anyone?
Anybody online who would like to comment, please raise your hand now. And there's no phone in today, it's all regular Zoom. So just go ahead and click the raise hand when you want to speak so that we don't miss you. Chair, I think it's fine to proceed.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to the next section, which is anyone on the council that wants to make a brief, like a comment or statement about something that's not on the agenda. Now's the time to do it.
Does this count for my forestry report?
Yeah,
Okay, may I please?
yeah,
Thank you very
brief.
much. I know. Station. I'm really excited that there are two people who want to take my position, and Lucy Hardcastle's position. Lucy Hardcastle is an alternate. This is my 5th year. And you're both here today, right? Lonnie Lazar, will you please raise your hand? And Rio Kuchera? There you are. And look at you, see, you guys should know each other. So they're practicing and learning about what we do. And so you got obviously the deadline for filling out the application and running. So this is your big test drive right here. And you might want to attend those other meetings as well. The LCP really does impact us a lot. And the housing element was very well represented by Forestville. People came up and said, I mean, aside from all the letters, if you go through the EIR, FEIR, you find all these letters from Forestvilleans, and I'm very pleased that our community is that involved very specifically on this 2,000-page document, right down to the minute details. So thank you, Forestville. Forestville's doing a good job and will continue doing a good job. And then just, every Forestville Farmers Market is Tuesday afternoon downtown park, and I run RSA Forestville booth, and we have a chipper program, affordable health, affordable clean up your property programs, and any number of things. And SoCo Adapt now also has, you'll see it on the MAC Facebook page, that SoCo Adapt has a new program for people to take advantage of to get their properties ready for fire season, which is now. So thank you.
Thanks.
And we
Scott.
have MAC tables at the farmers markets as well, Forest will go to.
Any other council member? Anything not on the agenda?
I have something really brief, just a community announcement. I just heard today that there's a group planning a gay pride event this
I heard
Russian
that too.
River, and it's going to be the weekend of October 14th and 15th. And they very much want to focus on providing activities to locals, even though they want to, of course, everyone's going to be invited in, but their Saturday events are all going to be, and we're going to have a parade. So that all the details I have so far, but it looks like it's going to be a restaurant wants to take back pride.
In Gurnville?
It's going to be a Gurnville.
That's for a parade.
Anyone else? All right, same thing, in public or on Zoom, you want to make any comments or not listed on the agenda, now it's time to do it.
If there's anyone online who would like to comment, please raise your hand.
I think that is the first time that those 2 seconds getting that.
Well, I just want to know that Lloyd was at the housing meeting.
Oh.
So it's not like he's not here tonight.
Anyway, okay.
ahead.
All right, thanks, Leo. So we're gonna move on to Sonoma Water about Potter Dam decommissioning, and thank you so much for being here. It's an important subject. I don't think a lot of people are aware of.
Okay, well, good evening.
Do you need that higher?
What's that?
Do you need that higher?
I don't know. It's fine. Can I just stand like this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and looks like I have my presentation. Thank you very much. So good evening or late afternoon. I'm Mike Thompson, Assistant General Manager with the Sonoma County Water Agency. And I'm here to provide you a presentation and an update on what's going on with the Potter Valley project. And so I will start with giving you a quick background. I'll just, how many people have heard of the Potter Valley project? Okay, quite a few.
We
And
are involved.
what's that?
We are involved in our community.
I figured you would, just good enough. So, I'll give you some basic facts on it. So the Potter Valley project was first constructed, I think it went online in 1906. It was originally constructed by a company called the Snow Mountain Power Company. And who saw that they looked at the river and they looked at the Russian River and they saw that there's this spot where the 2 rivers are only separated by about a mile and there's like a 400 or 500 foot elevation difference. So they bored a tunnel through the rock and put in a hydroelectric plant in Potter Valley, and they built a small dam called Cape Horn Dam to back up the water and push it in. And that's the way it operated for several years. And they only essentially diverted the water as it was available in the winter. Then in 1922, Scott Dam was constructed. And that formed Lake Pillsbury. And with that actually, when that went in and started operating, and then I think it was in 1929, PG&E bought the project from the Snow Mountain Power Company. It became PG&E's asset. So during those first years, or actually for the first 70 years, the Potter Valley project diverted about 160,000 acre feet of water into the Russian River Basin every year. And just as so you kind of get your feeling for how much water that is. For the Sonoma County Water Agency last year for the 600,000 customers that we had used 37,000 acre feet.
No, wait, wow.
So this is a lot of water. And what it did was, this was the first time that there was year-round flow in the Russian River. Prior to that, Russian River didn't have year-round flow. It had these intermittent pools here and there, but there wasn't year-round flow. And so with this, there was flow year-round. And I think a lot of the lower river and the whole county came to rely on the Russian River always having water in it as a result of this project. So they operate, this project operates under a license from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, and they operate on 50-year licenses. So they got their first license in 1922, that expired in 1972, and they relicensed it in 1972 for another 50 years. And that license expired in 2022, last year. And again, up until like about 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, it was providing about 140,000 acre feet to 160,000 acre feet a year. Then with some additional fishery work and opinions from National Marine Fisheries, that flow was essentially cut by more than half in the mid 2000s, to where the now is only diverting 60,000 acre feet a year, but still absolutely critical. As 2022 approached, several years before, PG&E had intended or expressed an interest that they were going to relicense the project. And they started that effort in 2016, 2017, and we're proceeding along that route until I think it was January of 2019 when they made the announcement that they weren't going to relicense it. They were going to look at what they call license surrender. That came as a big shock because during this whole process, when they were looking at relicensing or potential decommissioning, Congressman Jared Huffman formed an ad hoc, we call it an ad hoc, to look at the Potter Valley project and the relicensing with the idea that a future, this project has had really dramatic and really bad impacts on fisheries in the Eel River. Scott Dam completely blocks a lot of really great habitat up in the headwaters, and Cape Horn Dam, it's really hard for fish to get by that. So it's had these really difficult issues for fish there. And so he formed this ad hoc, and then there was a lot of work done. And what we found, or what they found was there was a lot of modeling done to find out how important is this water supply. And what was found was that and I've heard a couple estimates on that, without the Potter Valley project, in 8 out of 10 years, there isn't enough water in Lake Mendocino to meet the demands on Lake Mendocino. And in 2 of those 10 years, the lake would actually go completely dry. I've also heard, and that is, and I'm trying to get better interpretation of this or background on this, but that's if everything is possibly done to keep it from going dry, it only goes dry 2 out of 10 years. If things actually operate as normal and everyone's taking their demands and depending on other things, the modeling showed it actually goes dry in 56 out of 109 years on the hydrologic record. So this is a very dramatic issue. So around that time, when, this was all going on, we also, Sonoma County Water Agency did a study to try to understand what's the value of this water to the Russian River Basin. And we actually focused on the upper Russian River, upstream of Dry Creek, where Lake Sonoma discharges into the Russian River. And what we found that this water is worth somewhere in the range of 20 to $40 million a year, actually as a market value for the water. The effect on the economy might be a multiplier of that. So it was a really important issue, which is why our board really directed us to take a very active role in investigating this. And so when PG&E made the decision not to relicense it and go to surrender, really quickly a group came out of the Huffman ad hoc, which included Sonoma Water, the Mendocino County Inland Water Power Commission, Caltrout, Humboldt County, and the Round Valley Indian Tribe. We formed what was called the Two Basin Solution Partnership. Our group we were going to attempt to relicense it and take ownership of it. And as you know, we weren't successful in doing that, in large part that the cost of relicensing this project, just the studies and everything, was somewhere north of $20 million. And this is for the studies and everything. And so we were not able to raise those funds. And so we weren't able to move forward. But several things, really good things came out of it. We did a lot. We conducted feasibility studies to understand what might a two-basin solution project look like. We also developed something that I think was one, relationships. We built a lot of good relationships with what we call kind of on the other side of the aisle, where we both respected there's a need for water supply and there's a need for improved fisheries on the Eel. And we both had a lot of respect for each other's values and interests on that. And so we came up with something that would work. Honestly, took like 2 or 3 months with a lot of attorneys to put together something we call our shared objectives. They are a list of 9, and if you go to the Two Basin Solution Partnership website, you can find those. And I'm not going to go through them all, but they had things like we're looking for a two-basin solution, one that provides fishery benefits to the Eel River and more reliable water supply, or protects the diversion for the Russian River. We're looking for the economic and environmental health of both basins, protecting tribal culture and helping lift those up. And there were 9 different use of best available science to make decisions. And so so that was honestly a big asset, and it's really helping what's come up now. So the most recent effort that we're working on right now is something called the Russian River Water Forum. And I don't know if any of you have read about that. So this is the Sonoma Water. We applied for and received a grant to do 3 different projects, which were grants from the California Department of Water Resources to do 3 different efforts around the Potter Valley project. One of them was to essentially advance the work that the Two Basin Solution Partnership work had done to look at what are the different fish passage alternatives you would have. And I'll just take a step back. With this, our Two Basin Solution Partnership assumes Scott Dam and Lake Pillsbury would be coming down. There really isn't a way to get fish around that. And we agreed with that. Actually the cheapest, most cost-effective way for fish passage and effective way around Scott Dam was removal. There really isn't a way to do a fish ladder and make it work for both upstream and downstream. The other part of that is we really, our board and council and others did not see a public entity wanting the liability of owning Scott Dam. It's old, it has, and you might have read recently, there's been some additional seismic concerns raised on it where PG&E isn't keeping it full anymore. But we really had no interest in that. The other thing, our board has made it very clear that Sonoma Water as an individual entity will not acquire this. That this is a regional asset and there needs to be most likely a new regional entity to actually own this, because it is a 2-county it's larger than Sonoma water. And so that was one of the assumptions going into this. So one of the things from the DWR work was advancing that work. So we are right now evaluating 3 different fish passage alternatives on the Eel River past Cape Horn Dam. 2 of those alternatives assume Cape Horn Dam will be removed, and there will be one of them is a pump. There's different ways to still get water with the Cape Horn Dam down. And another one on that is a potential fish ladder. So those are being evaluated right now. And we're also doing our due diligence on all of the facilities to get a better idea of what we're acquiring. The second part of this, other part of it was doing a hydrogeologic investigation of storage opportunities in Potter Valley itself, because they won't have year-round flow. And the third was this thing called the Russian River Water Forum, to essentially bring together, and it started, like, I think we talked about listening. That started with, we hired a consultant, Ernst & West, to kind of identify what might be a local solution to this decommissioning that we could get kind of broad support for. And in doing that, we did started with Ernst & West, started by doing 37 interviews with different interest groups with 63 people, and it was a huge listening tour to try to understand, what are people's interests, which we do. And so that was done, and out of that came this group, what we're calling the Russian River Water Forum. And we had I was up in Ukiah for 5 hours today with our 3rd meeting on this, and it is, so it's a group that is made up of representatives from both the Eel and Russian Rivers, so Lake County, Mendocino County, Humboldt County, Sonoma County, we're all on it. There are tribal interests, and then it's all from, we have the up there. Thanks, I'm trying to keep on doing it. I know. So I'm kind of doing this by heart. So this planning group it's a non-decision making group, but it's a place really just to discuss and to understand what interests are, where, and how different groups sees things. So the planning group is made up of representatives from Lake Humboldt, Mendocino, Sonoma County government. So there's a representative from the county of Sonoma, tribal, and each county gets 1 seat. Tribal governments in both the Russian and Eel River, and tribal governments have unlimited seats. Every tribe can have 1 seat on this because they're sovereign governments. Water suppliers have seats in Sonoma County. There are 6 water supplier seats. So one of the seats is for what we're calling Western Sonoma County, or the Lower River, and that is Sweetwater Springs, and is Camp Meeker Rec Park is the primary, Gary Helfrich, and Eric with Sweetwater Springs is the alternate on the planning group. So we have Lower River, Upper River, Sonoma Water, and then 3 of our Sonoma County Water Agency water contractors are the water suppliers. We have environmental nonprofits from non-government organizations from both the Eel and Russian River, agricultural interests. We have 3 agricultural seats from Sonoma County, I believe 2 from Mendocino County, resource conservation districts, and then recreation interests as well. So we were all at the table today. And next slide. And so I'm obviously throwing out a lot of stuff. This is probably feels a little bit fire hose-ish, but in kind of breaking this apart, we've kind of come up with that there are really 4 really big issues. One, really 4 big questions. Is that one, what is it we want to acquire? What would a regional entity want to acquire? So that's this big group of questions. What facilities? How would they have to be modified? How will they work in that? So we have water supply, fisheries. That's one big group. The second big group is who's going to own and operate it. So we have to identify what entity would actually eventually own it. And it may be a transition. There may be a short-term entity, because one of the things that we already went through is the schedule. We have to move extremely quickly on this. But we have to identify what does that governance look like, both short-term and then in the long term, what would it eventually become. Third is, we have to identify how to pay for it. So for all of the water users who have gotten Potter Valley water or water from the Russian River generally for free for the last 100 years, we're going to need to monetize that water. Our initial estimates are that it could cost on the order about $5 million a year, just in rough terms, to operate a diversion in the future. And so we would need to come up with a funding source from water users or other beneficiaries. So we have to have a group that's figure out how do we, the economics and finance, how much will it cost to operate, and how will you actually monetize this water supply? And then the fourth is another big one, if those three weren't big enough, is the water rights. This will happen regardless, but a lot of the water rights on the Russian River are going to be kind of turned upside down.
Yeah. I used to be on Sweetwater Spring.
Oh, okay, so, I'm not going to water rights real quick, but I'll just give you an extremely high level that, Potter Valley, Snow County Water Agency was formed in 1949. And so those who were using Potter Valley water before us have what we call a senior water right. So their water right is superior to ours, but that's for water that comes from the project, flows through Lake Mendocino, doesn't get stored and keeps going down the river. And so that water used to flow all summer long. In the future, what we're looking at with Lake Pillsbury gone, we're looking at what we call a run of the river scenario, where we would only divert water when there's excess water and then yield over and above a fish need there. And so that's mainly going to be in the summer months winter months. So many of those senior water rights holders who had relied on this Potter Valley water for 100 years, that's not going to be available. We have to figure out how do we deal with that, and how and so also identifying. Anyways, those are the four main things. I've written down, there's about 30 questions under each of those categories, under governance, water rights, finance, and water supply and facilities that we have to work through. So this thing called the Russian River Water Forum, we formed 4 working groups around each of those areas, and we're going to be working through those in a larger collaborative process. So real quickly, what's coming up though is that in November, PG&E is going to be issuing their initial draft surrender application. They have indicated that their planned default is to essentially to modify both dams so that they no longer store water. So they're not necessarily removing down to bedrock. It's just they're going to make it so they do not store water anymore, and they would plug off the diversion. So it would end the diversion. And they said that is their plan, unless someone steps forward with an acceptable proposal to acquire whatever of those facilities. And so that application, like that initial draft, is coming out in November. And so we are working feverishly, and at times it feels like around the clock, to be trying to work through the water forum, trying to work with others to get something into PG&E so that they don't issue an application that an initial license surrender application that they're just going to end the diversion and walk away. Their goal, which is reasonable, at the end, is to have no more liability and no responsibility for any of these facilities. So they're looking right now, and the reason they're doing this right now, I think the project generates around 2 million in electricity. Well, when it's working, $2 million a year, and it costs somewhere in the $6 to $8 million a year off. So it's a money loser, and they want out of it because they can't monetize the water supply value. So that's why they are wanting to get out of it. So we're working hard. Our first goal is for the water supply for the Russian River interest is to do all we can to make sure their initial license surrender application doesn't preclude the diversion staying. So that's kind of where we are now. So I threw a lot at you, and so I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Right, question. So it looks like the East Branch of the Russian River Rice Fork. And would feed Lake Mendocino, the watershed would feed Lake Mendocino, and then that would in turn feed Lake Sonoma. Is that correct? That's, I mean, if we eliminate the bore, the actual tunnel between.
You know, there might be I can't remember if I have a little slide up there on this or not, but no, so Lake Sonoma's on Dry Creek.
Correct.
And yeah, I really can't see it too well, but so the Lake Mendocino includes the Potter Valley is within the
Correct.
Lake Mendocino watershed, and the Potter Valley water, you know, is what they call is abandoned, you know, comes out of the powerhouse within Potter Valley, and that flows into Lake Mendocino. So in a year like this year, where we had all the rain we had, we didn't need Potter Valley, it filled on its own. But that's not going to happen every year. Right. So thank you.
And all this infrastructure money, is any of it available for this? I mean, it seems like it would make sense to
Yeah.
use it for a dam and all the rest.
That's a great question, thanks, and thank you for asking that, because there's something I should have said that I didn't. So one of the things we have done is we have applied for a $2.5 million grant through the Bureau of Reclamation to take, as I said, we are looking at 3 different fish passage alternatives. One of them is a rough channel, a fish ladder, and then a pump facility. What we will be doing is identifying over the next probably 6 months, which of those is which we think has the most merit. And that one alternative will be advanced and designed to 60%. And from what I understand is that once you're in this Bureau of Reclamation funding stream, then it's pretty easy then to move into getting grants for construction. And so that would be a big part of it. And also we'll be in contact with the state. This is a state priority too. So I think one of the key things to making this work is getting state and federal funding for the construction and modification costs. And that's kind of what the conversation has been, getting non-rate-based funding for the capital modifications. But we need to show we have the ability to pay for the ongoing O&M of that.
How would that change jobs in the area of like Mendocino County, obviously is the majority of it, but how would it increase those kinds of jobs for those communities that might replace some of the jobs that would be lost to recreation? Obviously, it's different people, different skills, but.
Let's see, if I understand your question best, I think that the best way to put that, we're actually trying to preserve how it works now.
Okay.
And trying to limit the impacts of it as opposed to grow it. So this is more of almost like an existential threat right now. And the other thing though, I also want to make a really important point is that we don't look at this as we look at this as when it comes to water supply, we look at this as a portfolio that we think, at least at the Sonoma County Water Agency, we think over the next 40 years or whatever, we really need to be improving our Russian River water resiliency to a point where we don't need it.
Yeah.
Because it feels a little concerning to have so much of our watershed's economy and the environmental health of it dependent on a 1 mile tunnel that's 100 years old that's held up by redwood slats. And we think we should do better than that. So and so we are, some of the things we've worked on. We actually just had a big presentation on water supply resiliency, all the efforts that are going on here. One of them, I don't know if you've heard of FIRO, Forecast Informed Reservoir Operation. So this is something that we were the first in the world to do this, with Lake Mendocino, where giving a lot of stuff today. So, so reservoirs are operated based on a reservoir control manual that is actually approved by Congress. So they're a pretty big deal. And they were the ones that operate Lake Mendocino and Lake Sonoma, and like most of the reservoirs in the United States were designed or developed in the 50s and 60s. And we can forecast weather a little bit better now. And so what we're doing now is that the way it works is that Sonoma Water operates what they call the water supply pool, but when the water gets high enough and, you know, when this area may flood, they store water in the reservoirs. But what happened several years ago was we had a situation in Lake Mendocino where all this rain came in December and had a big spike, and then as soon as it stopped, the Corps completely emptied all of that down to the water supply pool, and it didn't rain again for what, 15 months?
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's
so that was really kind of set things in motion that we need to use the forecast abilities we have now, because so if we have this rain coming in and you see that it's you've got this big spike, but there's nothing else, then and we can pretty much see like a week or two out now that don't release it, just hold it, because it becomes water supply. And doing that was done in 2021, I think it was, and that really saved Lake Mendocino. I think would have gone dry during this up until the storms we had. If we hadn't have saved, we were able to save an extra 12, I think it was 12 or 13,000 acre feet of water. And when it got to the lowest point, I think it was at 15,000 acre feet. So it would have been effectively dry without that. So we're going to be doing that at Lake Sonoma. Yeah, we're doing that for now. So we've got a lot of water resiliency things going on. We're also, Dry Creek, Rancheria is looking at groundwater recharge up in the Alexander Valley. From the water conservation side, Sonoma Water, it was in 2004, we delivered, the demand on our water supplies was like 66,000 acre feet a year. And then we created this Sonoma Water Saving Water Partnership, and our population's gone up, but our demands are almost half of that now. They were 37,000 last year. The drought, everyone was working hard and all that, but so we really have gone to water conservation, increased recycled water, groundwater and groundwater recharge, and then with Bureau making the better use of our facilities for surface water. So the point being that there's more we have to do. We've done a lot to make our watershed more resilient, but the way we've looked at it is that we really need the next several decades to find a way to make us kind of wean ourselves off of Lake Minnetonka, off of the Otter Valley.
I'm just curious how PG&E is interacting with your group. I think I saw that they were part of it. And is the sense that they want to help solve this problem?
Yeah, I think that a couple of things on that. First of all, PG&E is a business. So understandably, their main goals are to minimize costs to the ratepayers through the decommissioning, and to eliminate or significantly minimize their ongoing liability. And so that's kind of where they are. And they've said that, if we can come up with a proposal or something, some regional entity can provide them a proposal that is acceptable, I think they would like to be able to work with us on that. But
have they indicated what is acceptable?
That's it. It's an ongoing discussion.
So, okay.
So I would
You're
say
getting feedback.
and they're talking with the fishery groups, they're talking with everybody, and they're really being careful to say the same thing to everyone. And it's interesting where they'll say something and different people and groups interpret that differently. So where we actually went back to them and saying, this is what we've heard you said, and they have provided us with clarifying statements says, no, this is what we said. And so, and
PG&E is also selling 49% of their generating capacity, including hydro as well as fossil fuel right now. And that's a bogus deal to generate more money for the itself.
I've heard something about that, and
it's in front of the CPC right now.
And that's, we've talked about that. We have FERC experts, decommissioning experts. We've got this whole team of experts that we're working with, and they've described how that is, you know, why that's being done. And I'm not gonna try to interpret that.
Right.
I have another question around the funding of the research. This is a topic that applies to many communities across the entire planet. What do you do about water, reduced water, increasing sustainability for fish and things like that? Is there funding from things like the Environmental Protection Agency or anything like if NOAA is coming up with funding for grants for things that have to do with infrastructure? Can there be funding from international organizations that are dealing with environmental issues because they're all having the same problem and maybe would love to be part of the solution?
Well, that's, I mean, somewhat, I haven't heard of necessarily that, but what I have heard of this effort, what I call FERO, the Forecasting Marine Reservoir Operations. The work we've done is been done through the Scripps Institute and Lynda, whatever was the Center for Western Weather Extremes, CW3 or something like that. But the work like that we've done here literally is the first that's been done like this in the world, and that's being exported elsewhere. One of the things, and I'll be honest with you, we in Sonoma County or in the Russian River Basin, we've been the recipient of probably more than our fair share of grant funding for innovative work on water management. We seem to be the kind of in somewhat ideal size. We want to say a lot of it goes to having the board of supervisors who think, as our board of directors, who think in a larger regional picture as opposed to just strictly like their water district. And so that's a really big part of it. So we've become, in some ways, a lot of a good test bed for a lot of innovative ideas in this area. And we have during this drought, when there was funding coming, that the state was giving funding for drought resilience, we got an inordinate amount here in Sonoma County for water conservation, for what I just talked about on Potter Valley, for groundwater recharge studies, for like I said, so we do actually really well in attracting grant funding, but a lot of it is because, like I said, and all that, I'm not just saying this for here, but our board is really pushes us to be innovative and to think outside the box a lot, and that makes us attractive to the state and others to try things.
Well, the European Union is dealing with this right now with farms versus fisheries and farms, the water use of farms versus the water use of the needs for the fish. And they have an election coming up and they're dealing with this at the moment. It's the same topic. It's over there in the European Union.
Where we are, just the way our water rights work, actually, the first priority is actually in-stream flow. Is the first priority for, according to our water right, and second is municipal health and safety, and actually ag kind of comes third. But there's no, anyways, I want to take a
Okay, do you have a?
Once the forum has come up with its recommendations, where do they go?
A couple things. One, it depends. So I think with regard to what a solution might be to get into to influence PG&E's initial application. If the form, I think in that case, we're going to need to move faster than this whole form, and there will be more of a vetting group and an outreach and understanding, and so there's been a lot of that going on. With regard to water rights or governance and finance, those are going to be, there's going to be more time to discuss those, and it hasn't met yet. There will be a leadership committee that is made up of elected officials that this will roll up to them, and this is really meant to be a forum. There may not even be recommendations coming out of it. We're going to strive to get to consensus, but no one is bound by anything coming out of this. It's really meant for discussion, understanding, and ideally reaching a consensus. But if you can't reach a consensus, still, if there's a majority view, that will be documented, and if there's dissenting views, that'll be documented. It's really just meant to, so it's a place for everyone, elected officials, staff, and start to develop a better shared understanding.
Any other council members? Lisa.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to thank Elise Weiland for bringing this issue to our agenda setting, because there really seems to be a sense of urgency right now around this topic. So thanks, Elise. I wanted to know, after the initial draft surrender application gets filed in November, just sort of briefly, what's the sort of procedural timeframe for response? And are they applying to FERC and then people get to respond, or groups get to respond? So just briefly and generally, what would the procedure be after?
Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. I should have mentioned that. So the initial draft application is not going to FERC. It is meant to go to all the stakeholders, and they will have 3 months up until February of 2024 to provide comments. Then in March and April, PG&E will incorporate those comments, and then they will issue their draft surrender plan to FERC in May of 2024. After that is submitted, then there will be another round of comments, primarily by governmental resource agencies, and they'll have a chance to comment. And then then they will submit a final surrender application plan in January of 2025.
Wow.
Cynthia?
I want to try to put a couple of our big difficulties here in the county together, as though one weren't enough. But Mike, I hear you talk about water conservation and using recycled water. And my understanding of what you were saying is that that's one way that we can minimize curtailments. You know, and basically be able to keep on having water in the things we already have. So my question is, since we all know that the county is really under the gun to build a lot of housing, I mean, to the point of hundreds, maybe thousands of units. And on top of that, there are, you know, several large commercial developments in the wind. How does all that mesh with these water difficulties? How can we, you know, try to put that together so that it works out?
Yeah, one of the things we have seen, as I said, our water demand in our system peaked in 2004. And as we've added, there has been growth since 2004, but yet our water supply demand has dropped about 40%. And much of the, we still think there's a lot more water conservation out there that can be done. I mean, our contractors have done an amazing job in honestly, people removing lawns. It's lawns. I don't have a lawn anymore. But it's there, and the new developments that are going in don't have lawns. They have drought resistant landscaping. And so we're like I said, we're just because of the amount of work that's going into water conservation, and people have always said that water conservation is the cheapest form of supply. And we're going to continue to work on that again through our Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership.
Any other council members? Oh,
Just one quick curious question. I have an understanding that Marin also is a customer of Sonoma County Water. And how do they fit into this as a stakeholder, or are they just viewed as a customer?
That's a good question. There are two entities in Marin. The North Marin Water District is actually one of our prime contractors. We have 8 prime contractors, and then Marin Municipal has a separate contract. So with Marin Municipal, we provide them with what we call a supplemental source of water. They have their own water, but we provide them with the supplemental source, and they take most of their water, as I recall, during the winter. When we have excess water available, they're able to use our water to meet their demands while they fill their reservoirs.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they take some during the summer. I'm not saying it's all, but they are more emphasized of using our water to meet their demands so they can fill their own reservoirs, and they drop back their use during the summer.
Interesting.
Elise,
A comment on the water consumption. We were at a Danish presentation of their water system this last week, was it? And their average household is 26 gallons a day, and ours is 96 gallons a day. That gives you an idea of the difference. We have some room to make improvements.
Yeah.
I thought that was a startling figure.
Yeah.
all right. Anyone not on the council have a question or a comment? Yes,
Sure.
yes, you.
Actually, I'm looking more for clarifications on a couple things. I think I heard you say that the Scott Valley Dam has to go.
Scott, yeah.
We'll be one.
PG&E is planning to remove that.
Okay, so if so, even without it, that, I want to make sure that means like Pillsbury is gone as a lake.
Yes,
But it is still possible to divert some water.
yes.
Okay.
From during the Otten ad hoc, we're kind of going from a little bit from memory here, was that they looked at the amount of water that would be available in the winter, again, looking at like 100 years of hydrologic record of like what flows were in the yield, and that the estimate was there's still be able to divert about 40 to 60,000 acre feet a year, which is about what we're getting now if it was during the winter. That's again from just a sheer math standpoint. Can you physically do that to be able to divert water when there are these like really high flows in the Eel River? And that's what part of the DWR grant is working on. It's like, if you can divert, can you physically divert the water during these really high flows on the Eel? And that's part of what we're looking at.
Okay. Second was, you're saying it would be probably $5 million to operate.
That's the real rough estimate.
Okay, well, my question is more, give me an idea of where that is in scope. I mean, $5 million by itself is a lot of money, but if we've got, $1 billion budget, it's a.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, if you look at that with regard to, there's roughly about 55,000 acre feet of water rights attached to Lake Minnesota. So that, that puts it in terms. So just in terms of like, for the Sonoma County Water Agency's water transmission system budget is around 60 million a year. So
that's a good chunk of change to the budget.
Yeah, for whoever owns this. Yeah, but again, it's providing this large regional benefit.
Okay. And last, another bottom line.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm hearing, we're still going to be able to turn on the faucet and get water. Where from a lower Russian River, we would still get flow during the summer from Sonoma.
Not necessarily. This is one of the challenges that the flows in the Russian River are set each year depending on, and they will be, they used to be set based on inflow in Lake Pillsbury, of all things. Because that's the way that's the way minimum stream flows in the Russian River were set. That's been changed. We changed pretty much every year to do a temporary urgency change petition to change that index to Lake Mendocino, storage in Lake Mendocino. And so the flows in the Russian River are tied to the storage levels in Lake Mendocino. So
totally independent from Sonoma.
Yeah. Yes. Somewhat. It's all a system, but for example, right now, if I remember right, that the flows in the upper Russian River right now, for example, the minimum at Cloverdale, I think it is 125 CFS, and that flows all comes down here, and we release water from Lake Sonoma and pull it out of the lake at Forestville to our customers. We don't generally don't take much of the water that's coming down the river from Lake Mendocino. So there is a connection. It's more flows in the bottom line flows. Levels in the Russian River, minimum in-stream flows are tied to Lake Mendocino storage levels, not Lake Sonoma.
Drop back one, because I'm trying to remember, so we did toward the end of the drought, because we normally flow, I think you're like 125, 150.
The end of one.
Somewhere in that. I mean, we're at 150 right now.
Yeah.
But then during the drought years, it got dropped to, I'm trying to say it was 80.
25. I think was the
Was it all the way down to 25?
25. So there was 25 is here.
Here, not Cloverdale, here.
Right.
And that was because of fisheries. It was, sometimes they required to drop something and I was still let even if it ran out.
So the 25 CFS was based on the critically low storage levels in Lake Mendocino. That's how why that's how it's trying to that.
But it was to keep the fish alive, what he did say.
Yes, oh yeah, yeah.
But then something has to make up. If Mendocino can't do it, something has to make it up for fish,
Keep the
right?
fish alive.
Yeah, and that's really one of the conundrums we'll have to work through. You know, if Lake Mendocino is going dry, you know,
I think all of us remember how ugly it got when we got to the low flood.
yeah.
That river was ugly green.
I think at some point we should probably also have Jessica, Martini Lamb, and sort of give an update on the fish flow DEIR as well. Because that's sort of a different but parallel and slightly overlapping issue, because one of the questions you're asking about fish, right, that was about this idea of, you know, having kind of a different baseline flow as opposed to a temporary urgency change orders, which resulted in 25 based on lack of storage capacity.
All right, anyone else have a question, comment? All the way in the back.
It's Rio.
And you might want to come a little bit closer so that
Well, let's try and talk a little loud there. How's that?
it needs 8 feet.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, I was just curious about, so getting to the clarification of it again, so the flow, so the diversion that is being proposed type thing is just going to be during the winter time.
Most, yeah, when the water's available.
And so then it sounds like that would just be to try to prop up the reservoirs that are here now. So, but then that means we lose all of the capacity that was Pillsbury during the summertime.
The hope is that the water we divert in the winter will pretty much fill up Lake Mendocino. And so, and then from there, then there's enough water to maintain healthy flows all through the summer. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
Just like conceptually, yeah. You've given us a lot of information.
Yeah.
I'm not up to date on all the details, but, versus kind of dry years and wet years here, what people are kind of used to in the lower Russian River. Yeah. What should we expect after this site, or after this whole process in 2026?
Yeah, no, this process won't be, this won't be done. This whole thing probably won't be done for 10 or 15 years. So this is a marathon, we're just starting on, so, and unfortunately, I'm gonna give you an attorney answer to that, it depends. Yeah, because there's.
I guess maybe range of like worst case, best case. Worst case, we have 0 water in the river in summer, and best case, I don't know, like.
Worst case, very little water in the river in summer. Best case, it's like, it is not.
Thank you.
That's pretty good.
Sorry, one quick comment, without dating myself too badly here. I remember in 1947, the Russian River went dry. As a kid at Hacienda, we could walk all the way across the river. It was like there's no water. So
It's happened.
I remember those days well, because we couldn't swim. We had to sit on the.
Yeah. I'm dating myself because I think it was in the early 1970s, the Hellwigs used to have a house somewhere down on next to in the backwater of Johnson's Beach, and I got to go on my first motorboat ride. In the lake behind there. Right. I always wanted to find out where is their house, because I was like, 3 or 4. Right. Yeah. This is a magical place.
Are any questions on Zoom?
There is one. hand,
Okay.
So let Leo come in. Leo, are you there?
Yep. We have Brenda Edelman, and if anybody else would like to raise their hand, now's the time to do so. Brenda, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk.
Can you
should
hear
be
me?
able. We hear you.
All right, thank you very much. It's my understanding that the low flows in the summertime, the minimum flows, are based on the biological opinions demand to be able to develop a lagoon situation at the estuary, and not based on the flows or the amount of water at Lake Mendocino. Lake Sonoma has more than twice as much water as Lake Mendocino. And in all my readings, I have never seen proof that any of the Lake Mendocino water reaches our area. The flows we get are basically from Lake Sonoma, if we get any at all. And during drought, we are really at the end of the stream, so to speak. I've heard other environmentalists say similar things about flows at Healdsburg. So, and I've also read things on the water agency's website that states that they need the dry creek flows to supply their contractors during extreme drought. So I think maybe Mr. Thompson can respond to some of those comments.
I think there were a lot there. So the flows are based on both, you're right, the biological opinion and storage levels in Lake Mendocino. They aren't, it's not one, it's actually they're together on that. And yes, that Lake Sonoma is really the primary source of water for our water contractors.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments?
There's
Thank
no
you.
other
Oh,
Can I just wrap up comments? Adrian is one of our water protectors from District 4. She worked with us in the confluence and with the so-called PI and many ways to help save our river and our water.
So Adrian Garialdi, and I am a planning group, water forum planning group alternate, and I'm representing Western River Confluence and also agriculture. So I have been working in more of the Alexander Valley area, and we've been working on the downwater recharge, and then also during the drought, you may have heard of the water sharing program. And that was something we spent a couple of years developing. We actually got to implement that last year, and so we're trying to really think outside the box. We've been working with the agencies very successfully and the tribes and everybody up there to put some other programs out there that we can conserve water and improve our reliability. But I did want to say that on your agenda, there's a website for the water forum, and I encourage you to go there and go to the planning group tab and look down at the meetings. There were also some technical presentations that were given at the water rights and fisheries and flows group. I think they're about 20 minutes each presentation, and they're really good. They explain the Potter Valley project and the fisheries, the flows issues, and of course the water rights, which is something we're all trying to sort out. All of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Maybe ones that were.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on to committee reports. So Joe, communications.
I will communicate. So the communications committee represented today by myself, Betsy and Vicky. Patty's not present today. We've been attending local events, passing out county contact information, informing folks about the existence of MAC and what our function is, and recruiting MAC candidates. And so some of the topics that have been brought to me and us, the Main Street Bridge in Rio is a big topic. People want some kind of solution there, concerned about businesses downtown, traffic, et cetera, et cetera. The housing element is a big topic, talked about already. There are still questions. The first governance meeting that we had at Kernville School, a lot of people attended thinking we were going to talk about the housing element. So I'm getting a lot of those questions. Can we talk about the housing element of governance? And the answer is no. That's not what that meeting's about. The local coastal plan, people comment on that continuously and are very confused. And Lynda, I know you've done a lot of work trying to clarify your position and what is actually going on there, but it is a confusing topic. PG&E's terrible performance. Personally had 3 power outages this week, but people around here are fed up with PG&E with little or no accountability. Also, I hear about trash. We hear about the West County Community Services building, the old Bank of America building. A lot of commentary about the new murals and graffiti there. The most interesting one recently is 3 people have approached me about dead deer on the road and what to do about that. Oh boy. Yeah, Elise.
We're getting the in front of the Bank of America building power wash this coming week.
There you go. Thank you for that answer.
That was a spinning conversation that I tried to stay out of.
Also the hotel,
Yes,
the hotel and access,
to the beach.
not just access to the beach, but, you know, in case we need to evacuate.
Okay,
So, just the ability to get out of Dodge if necessary.
that is still a big concern. Anything else come across your way?
The roads,
Yeah.
everybody talks about the roads.
Potholes
Terrible
or-
condition, yeah.
They're getting better all the time.
So
There are some that have gotten better, yes.
not hers.
They now should report roads issues since they were going connect.
Yes.
We talk about SoCo Connect every time there's something. And, you know, from what we hear, there's a quick response time,
Yes.
which is really wonderful. Since last meeting, we've attended farmers markets in Guerneville and Forestville, the Rio Fest, the Maribel cleanup. Anything else in the last month?
The yards.
Darts.
Lots of events
Oh,
coming.
and the night market.
Night market.
Since last-
I think we talked about that. But there are lots of events that are coming this summer. We can't get to them all. Best that you have turned out, and Lisa, you're probably not going to do that right now, but you've been out to one. But we again invite anybody on that, any alternates or regulars to come to these events. The sign up fee which we have distributed. And you guys who are new or forthcoming, you're welcome.
And alternates, and knowing that you don't have to do the whole event. You
Right.
can take a chunk of time, a couple of hours,
Yep.
and it's really fun to talk to people in the community, and they really are engaged with us. And some of them don't even know who we are. It's very nice to be able to explain that and get them interested and engaged.
And to get them signed up for the newsletter.
Yes,
Right.
That's one of our main goals.
Yeah, we hand out a little information sheet with all kinds of links on it.
and we're now taking email addresses as well, so that we can actually get them on the newsletter list.
And lastly, yesterday I attended a meeting of Cafecitos, which is a group of West County Latinx community members. It was at Guerneville School. And
I'm sorry Lupe is not here, but I talked about MAC, what it is to that group. Lupe translated. I'm embarrassed, I don't speak Spanish, honestly. But yeah. But it was really wonderful because we had long wanted to start reaching that community, which is a strong voice in the county, but it's not a strong voice because of access. And so one of the things I talked about there was getting a MAC number from that community. And I have two people who said they were really interested in doing so. And I'm sorry Lupe's not here. She's going to come with one of those people tonight. But that's pretty exciting. Anything else? Comments?
All right, any questions for communications?
I have a question regarding PG&E past trip outages in Gurnville. We also have past trip outages in Casadero, and we've had over 12 outages in 9 months. The response time from PG&E is an average of 4 hours to restore power because they have to have crews come out from Santa Rosa to examine the lines before they can re-energize. Southern California Edison has not followed the same approach as PG&E. They have what's called tree wire or insulated wire, where PG&E has bare conductors or bare wire. And insulated conductors preclude this problem with fast trip that we've been experiencing. And TURN, T-U-R-N, is a lobbying group in San Francisco, and they're lobbying for PG&E to basically insulate their wires on high threat fire areas, tier 2 and tier 3 high fire threat areas. The PG&E cost for undergrounding the 10,000 miles is $18,000 per customer. $18,000 per customer, where the conversion to tree wire or insulated conductors is a heck of a lot less, and it can be accomplished in 3 years. So I recommend folks go to the TURN website and petition that PG&E consider utilizing insulated conductors in forested areas.
Well, I hope they're compelled to do that.
It's called TURN.
TURN, yeah.
Is it?
I mean, if it works and it costs a lot less, why aren't they doing it?
Because they should have done it in the 60s.
I know it's a dumb question.
Look, Sandy, we're like 80% of.
In Pocket, not Vacation Beach, but Pocket Canyon, our power actually did not go out this time, 3 times in a row, but we were out like at least once a week through the winter. Because our power comes up through Mays Canyon, and it's a disaster.
We were out this time. We were out for 9 days in Casadero.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Is TURN and a website, an organization, how do you find it?
Just go to turn.org.
They're
Yeah.
I'll find it.
Okay.
In a minute.
Any public questions for the ad hoc on communications? Anyone online? Okay, Lisa, community cleanup.
Community cleanup. So in the packet, I included a sort of a mid-year report, so I'll just read from that. Thanks to our members, Alice, Vicky, Vesta, Carol Shoemate from Russian River Keepers, and Danny Fair, volunteer from Hacienda. In 2023, our ad hoc formed to initiate a locally focused approach toward community cleanup. Our ad hoc was formerly known as TRASH. We meet each month, so we met in May, April, March, and February. Our June meeting, we cleaned up the Mirabel Park and Ride with the help of Cafecitos. So that was Lupe and Sandra and Norma, and also Vicky, Vesta, and Lucy. Let's see, I will be creating a how to do your 1-day micro cleanup document imminently. The ad hoc hosted a cleanup in Forestville in May to clean up the downtown and prep for the June 3rd parade. And the ad hoc receives a list of weekly county mowing, and I can distribute that to the MAC. so that we can eliminate trash being shredded on the road. We are researching how to organize neighborhoods around recology bulk trash allowances. Our next meetings for the year will be on July 27th, August 24th, which I think we need to reschedule because of the joint MAC meeting, September 28th and October 26th. There will be at least 2 more community cleanups coming up. Cafecitos wants to do a cleanup, and in Guerneville and in Monterio and Villa Grande, we've heard there's a cleanup that some folks want to do. So thank you to the staff who've helped us do all this, and to Brandon and Valerie from the county who helped with our one-day Mirabelle Park cleanup. Anything else? And we'd love volunteers anytime.
Any questions for Lisa?
Well, we sent, are we, in our cleanup committee, are we partnering with Adopt a Road? Because there's still some segments of roads in our lower MAC area that are not adopted yet. It's on the Adopt a Road website. Have we officially joined in that effort, or are we considering them separate?
Are you saying we, like the LRRMAC?
Yeah, the LRRMAC and the cleanup committee, are we officially like, what do you call it, trying to get people to become Adopt a Road people?
Well, let's talk, how about if we talk about that on our meeting in a couple weeks, because that's a good point that you bring up.
Okay.
I don't have the answer.
Sorry. Anyone in public have a question for Lisa? Okay, Betsy, Pocket Canyon renaming. This is a toughie.
It is a toughie, and it has been a toughie, and my work life is busy, but I would like to propose that we consider renaming the Pocket Canyon District Guerneville South or South Guerneville, because the entire district is both south of the bridge or south of the river / Pocket Canyon, because the Pocket Canyon section of it goes all the way to Canyon Rock. And I think it would just make it more inclusive for the constituency that lives within that district. And I understand that there's a bylaws change coming up soon.
Yeah, we'd have to change it in the bylaws.
And I'd like to put forward the possibility of doing that.
Have you been in discussions with the Guerneville MAC people as well on that change? And
Yes, I have talked to Joe
yeah,
and but not Nick. Because I assumed Nick would be here, but not. He's season. And Joe is kind of, because I mean, we could technically call Guerneville, North Guerneville versus South Guerneville, so as not to kind of separate south from, so it's not like, the other side of the tracks kind of thing.
Are you saying the people in the south of the bridge and the river don't consider themselves Pocket Canyon?
I don't know. I live in Vacation Beach.
Okay.
And there's Drake Road, which does not consider itself.
And Drake Road is not part of the Guerneville.
No.
No.
Drake Road is Pocket Canyon.
It's all separated by the
It's
river.
all separated by the river.
I personally don't care if Guerneville is renamed. But I don't think it would be confusing if it just kept the name Guerneville.
I don't think so either, and I really don't think that calling it South Guerneville is going to make it sound like the other side of the tracks.
Guerneville, the other side.
Because we're.
And then what about changing the boundaries of the district so that the Drake Road and all those very complicated and condensed populations that are on the south of the river are part of Guerneville instead? There was a reason.
That makes absolutely no sense, because there's not enough population
That's right.
on Pocket Canyon
To
to
be
justify a district.
And that, like, say the Forestville side, if that part of Pocket Canyon couldn't join Forestville and the other.
Not just. No, it makes sense for Pocket Canyon to be wanted to be, and Pocket Canyon doesn't want to lose the name
Right.
because because people who live in Pocket Canyon embrace that. I live in Pocket Canyon.
So does it end at Green Valley?
It ends at Giovanetti.
Okay.
That's what I thought, that it would end at Greek Valley or at Base Canyon, at the other end of Base Canyon, but it doesn't, it goes to Giovanetti.
That's all, that's almost.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it is for.
But it seems to it seems the people that are in the Pocket Canyon district right now, if it was called Gurnville South.
But we're
They-
proposing a slab.
Yeah. They would get that better than,
Absolutely.
yeah. And
Absolutely.
that's what's the important part.
And I
right?
think a lot of the Drake Road people
Think of themselves as Gurnville.
and Vacation Beach certainly, even though my house is practically
Yeah, I know.
Bohemian Grove.
Yeah, I
you know,
know.
it's in- the Northwood's right across the river from me. So it's just a sprawling district and very difficult to. But I think calling it, since the people on Drake and on in Vacation Beach consider themselves Gurnville, we should add it to the name.
Absolutely. Makes sense to me. Any comments from,
Would we need a motion? to
Any
get this
local
ball
constituents?
rolling?
well, we should, any public comments?
Yeah, I will, just because I'm the alt for the group. I think it's a great idea.
And he's
If
Drake.
you are Drake or Vacation Beach / Neely, that whole run, you identify Birdville, if you don't identify Otten.
Right.
And I think what we really want to do, I mean, it would be not, it's almost like if you merge the whole Birdville and our district together and just had one big district, it might be just as okay. Because we all kind of I identify more Birdville than I do the other way.
Okay. Any other public comment?
I'm just trying to wonder why you want to change.
The thing that ever since its inception, really, when you say you're on the MAC from Pocket Canyon, people don't know what that is. Right, so it's a little bit nebulous, but if something like Betsy's talking about, you say Gurnville South, that's more intuitive, so they get it, and so we've had a hard time getting a rep from there, because if you say a Pocket Canyon rep, I know, well, I don't know if I live in.
There's so few.
Nobody's gonna get it. Right.
They don't know if they can have it.
Yeah, because they don't.
They're on Neely or Drake.
We're in Pocket Canyon, but yet we're in the Pocket Canyon district.
The way the lines is.
Yeah.
It's just a
So
huge sprawling
it's
district.
just for Matt.
Yeah,
Right.
for MAC, I
Nothing
think it's
else.
a misnomer.
It's
to
to
call-
get people included. It's to make them feel included.
Yeah, and Justin,
So you didn't use the school district boundaries as, it wasn't my job to draw the district.
It was way back before this all started, the district boundaries were established and partly by.
That's her fault.
We did, I mean, we had a lot of community involvement in how to form this and what to call things or whatever. I don't recall specific, I don't know if you do, recall specifically about why it was Pocket Canyon.
Well, the first rep from that district lives in
Oh,
Pocket
yeah,
Canyon.
But the Pocket Canyon and the Forestville side of things, Pocket Canyon is Forestville. So that's where all of us Forestvilleans think of Pocket Canyon as Forestville.
And yet Pocket Canyon, Gurnville ends at the other end of. Directly, it's ring that it comes out. It adds for my last.
That's what they're.
Yes.
Yes.
I know.
There you go.
Go ahead.
I just provide a little bit of information. We spent a huge amount of time drawing the lines and really like it was drawn by the community. You know, we threw up some straw man ideas. Everyone, we drew them with highlighters at a series of meetings for both the coast and the river. But I actually don't recall spending a tremendous amount of time on names at all. And so I think this is actually a very salient conversation, and that, you know, having a name that is reflective of all of the communities that are in our district would help you identify yourself, right, to people. And so, that's one thing that we didn't really talk about. It was just talking Canyon so that to make it clear that it wasn't the Vernonville district, but I think that's fully appropriate and would welcome, that guidance on the naming.
And we saw the issue with Casadero Duncan's Mills / Duncan's Mills.
There you go.
There you go.
It's not our
And-
precedent.
and really, I think, and keeping Guerneville South or
South Guerneville.
South Guerneville separate from Guerneville is also good, because I think you have different set of issues.
We are over the bridge.
Than,
But you do
And we have very
accept-
different issues.
yeah, okay, so.
It's called District Over the Bridge.
So can we just give direction to include that name change in the bylaw?
I'll bring that, yeah, so we'll
And-
bring bylaws probably at the next meeting.
Awesome.
And it'll be called Guerneville South / Pocket Canyon, and we won't make any changes to Guerneville.
We need to
Correct.
vote.
No,
We'll vote on it next.
and when it doesn't bylaw.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to Lisa, you're up again, and land acknowledgement.
Okay, so our ad hoc is Patty from Monterey Villa Grande and Vicky and myself. Our committee has done a deep dive into the land acknowledgement issue, which of course, as we get into it, is much more layered and complex. And what we're trying to do now is determine our next steps, which basically involve discussing District 5 interaction with local tribes and how we can best focus our engagement. So what I've done is reached out to Tracy, who I think is on vacation this week, to ask her, because she had the most involvement with the sea otter issue and tribal consultations. So to not sound ignorant, even though the more we learn about this, the more ignorant I personally feel on the subject, we need more district involvement, and that's our next step. So Vicky, if you want to add to that, feel free, but basically we're in a sort of a holding pattern until we talk to Tracy.
Yeah, and it's just, as Lisa said, it's just so much more complicated as an issue than we anticipated. And as we get into it, we have been trained, we've gone through some training from some of the tribes, and just have seen how layered this issue really is.
Great. Any questions or comments from any council?
My comment is, thank you for the work you're doing on it. So many businesses and people and organizations just throw out a land acknowledgement, which is basically meaningless.
Yes.
And making this meaningful is an important thing.
Thanks. Anyone in public have a question or comment? Thank you all for attending tonight.
The issues for next time?
You can send.
Oh, just send it to you, okay.
Next meeting is meeting.
Oh, it's. You might require a meeting.
Oh, okay.
The
one that bring up free Wi-Fi.
Next month.
Okay, maybe over the next. Okay, with that, thank you all for attending, and thank you all for.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we need a, let's just say one thing before we return to. Thank you all for being such a great group of people, like you, it doesn't always happen. So I appreciate it. So it's nice for everyone to be said, so thank you. And with that, can we get a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Yeah, we'll need a roll call because we have someone that's.
We don't vote though.
Oh, okay, all right.
So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Online.
Rio is long.
Oh, God, no.